Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
With your host, certified Cicerone Michael Agnew.
And Laura Mosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month we invite a guest author to read their words and talk about writing while sipping beers specially paired with their work.
Today's guest is Nicole Burnham.
So sit back,
pop a cold one,
and dive into some books
and brews.
With Laura eating, we are ready to go. Laura, how's your month out there in the RV trailer?
My month has been very, very eventful. Not only, I was going to, be funny and say my month has been packing, because I was packing like 10 hours a day for 3, 4, 5 weeks. It was a blur. Because as you know, we have a lot of stuff. We have a research library, which is like 5,000 books. And I just showed Michael my library right there. We've really reduced it.
So I'm guessing you haven't done a lot of reading this month.
Actually, surprisingly, yes, I have. Because, once the movers cleared everything out, and it was amazing. I had everything packed. I had even taken the beds apart. They got it out in 9.5 hours.
Wow.
They were miracle workers. Nicole, you probably don't know, but my husband and I have 75, 80 instruments between us, including 2 grand pianos. And
that's a task.
Yes. And one of the grand pianos, they couldn't figure out how to get the leg off. So we called my piano tuner and he said, you whack it from up on top. So they didn't have rubber mallets. So they put double layers of cardboard and took a hammer and they were wailing on my piano. And I was just like, oh. And then they figured out, no, you have to hit it the other way. That was unpleasant. But actually, it's been a very eventful month because, as you can see, we're up in our RV with our cool there goes the salmon, with our cool Celtic knot back here, which we thought it was the coolest thing when we found this because my kids are, half Irish. Their dad's so it fits. But we got up here and we bought a truck. So we're going to have a driveway that's a quarter mile long. So we got a pickup truck to plow in the winter. And then I put out a new book since I've been sitting here in the RV, with nothing to do but work now.
Wow.
I had started this idea for a journal called The 4 Spheres, and it's based on this idea that, to be kind of well-rounded, to keep yourself in balance, mentally, emotionally, and so on, there are 4 areas in which you should do some work every day. So you should do something, let me see if I can remember this, because I literally wrote the book on it. It's an old philosophy. You should do something mental, something physical, something good for your emotions, and something spiritual every day. And so I designed this journal to kind of help, just write it down, to get into the habit of thinking like that. So I'm pretty excited about that.
Very nice.
Yeah, how about you?
I've just been dealing with stupid, insane tour prep stuff as schools keep flipping out on us and doing strange things. So we start this week.
Mm-hmm.
So we go out, my crew goes out on Thursday this week.
Okay.
And the other crew's first show is supposed to be on Friday, the 20th. And then my agent got a call from that school yesterday morning, saying, I have made a horrible mistake for which I take full responsibility. I know everything was set up for the 20th, but I actually accidentally scheduled it for the 21st.
Oh, no.
So it's just everything's messed up. This has been the entire period getting ready for this tour. Schools just doing flaky stuff like that.
Has there been a lot of back and forth, yes, we're going to do it in person. No, we're not. Yes, we are again.
No, not that much. A lot of changing mask policies. A school told me on Friday that they weren't requiring masks. And then I got an email Saturday morning saying they are now requiring masks. So that kind of policy is changing.
Okay. Well, that's easier to deal with at least than in person.
That's not a problem.
Yeah.
Wrong dates, that's harder to deal with.
It's what?
Wrong dates, that's harder to deal with.
Yeah, that's a problem. Did it conflict with anything else that you had set up?
Well, it actually worked out kind of well. So the crew that was supposed to go there can't go there because they all have conflicts. But my crew, we happened to have a dead day on the road because another school pulled out. So we will fly up from St. Louis to do that show on the 21st and then fly back down to St. Louis to finish our Southern Illinois swing.
So it worked out at least.
Yeah. And it filled up our dead day. I hate dead days on the road because they just cost me money.
Right. No kidding. So what have you been reading, or haven't you?
Nothing.
Too busy? Well, I covered you again.
Good.
With all this time on my hands, I actually, I've been reading a book I wanted to get to. It's called Letters from the Desert by Carlo Corretto, who's from the early 1900s. And he's got quite an interesting life story, very active in the years prior to World War II, trying to, stop some of that crisis that ended up happening anyway. So he's got life story, and it's an interesting book. And then you remember Sean Brink, who we had on as our guest 9 months ago. He put out a new book called Pets for Legion, and it's kind of a horror story. It's pretty wild. So I enjoyed that. I read that pretty much in one day. So
burned through. So who's our guest today?
Well, we are on episode number 28, which...
that's right. We didn't say the episode number.
No, we didn't.
Because I never get it right anymore.
Well, see, I have it in my notes here. I wrote it down after that one time I made a mistake, and, it's haunted me forever. We're on episode 28, but technically it's really 38 because of radio station and a place that shall not be named. And today we have with us Nicole Burnham. And did I say that right?
You did, yes.
So Nicole Burnham is the RITA award-winning author of over 20 novels. Her popular Royal Scandals series is set on the fictional Mediterranean island of Sarcassia? How is that pronounced?
Sarcassia. It's fictional, so whatever's in your mind is what it is.
That's true until the author tells you otherwise. We got to go with what the author says. So on the fictional Mediterranean island of Sarcassia, and revolves around the lives of the burali royal family. The series Royal Scandals San Romini focuses on the Di Tallora family of San Romini, a small independent nation at the northern end of the Adriatic. Nicole grew up moving around the world due to her father's military career and still travels as often as possible. She now lives near Boston. When she isn't writing, she enjoys trail running and spending time at Fenway Park, which actually I used to live really close to Fenway Park.
It's a great neighborhood.
I really liked it. That was, 1988, so like 33 years ago. And that's where I met my first husband, which is how I ended up being married to someone from Dublin, because he was there on a J1 visa.
Oh, yeah.
They just drop the kids off at a hostel and basically tell them you're on your own for the summer, show up again September 1st and we'll fly you home. And you better have the money to pay for it. So get and a friend had dropped me off at the same hostel. I was just going to spend the summer there just to get away from Wisconsin. And that's the whole story unto itself, which I'm not going into because it would take the whole hour. But I really did like Fenway Park, and I worked on Kenmore Square there, Dunkin' Donuts, and for a rental agent. So it was a very eventful, fun summer. Place.
Well, that Dunkin' Donuts is still on Kenmore Square. So it's right when you come out of the tea stop. It's very busy.
Okay. I wonder if it's still the same owners. That was, again.
That I couldn't tell you.
Stories. Yeah. Yeah. My ex-husband and I both worked there together, and it was, like I said, lots of fun stories about that summer in that place and the real estate agents and the whole works. So I guess we're ready for beer number one.
All right. Let me just make sure I got the right order for these readings. The first one is Scandal with a Prince.
Yes.
Okay. And then the second one is Slow Tango.
Let me check my notes. Ooh,
Okay. I just don't want to introduce the wrong beer at the wrong time because that would be embarrassing.
that would be really embarrassing. It would be a scandal even.
Would.
With the Prince, Slow Tango, and then To Kiss a King.
Okay, great. So, Tango with the Prince. When I read this, I was picturing some sort of really elegant, fancy soiree with elegant people dressed elegantly, drinking elegant things.
That's a lot of elegance.
So, the beer that I chose is from Goose Island Brewing in Chicago. It's called Sofie. It is a Saison style that has a little bit of wild fermentation to it. So it's got a little bit of funkiness, but it is light, very wine-like, effervescent. So it's kind of like champagne. And I kind of pictured people at this soiree drinking champagne in flutes or coupe glasses. And so I wanted something that was kind of champagne-like. No, that's the wrong glass, Laura.
Wine-like, these are our camping wine glasses.
Yeah, that's a wine. That's like a wine glass. I'm talking a champagne flute. Of course, I've got it in a beer glass. So.
Hey, we're roughing it, okay? I'm going to have to make do with the wine glass for champagne-like beer.
You probably wouldn't like this one, Laura, because it is very dry, very bitter, and a little bit funky.
A little bit funky.
Mm-hmm. I find it delightful.
So, full disclosure, I'm actually drinking last night's wine that I didn't finish because we probably fell asleep in front of a movie. So what face would I have made had I been drinking Sofie?
It wouldn't have been the IPA face, but it wouldn't have been the big multi-barrel aged Imperial Stout face either.
Just somewhere in between, huh?
Yeah.
All right. So, are we ready for reading number 1?
We are. Cheers.
Certain men possess voices so richly captivating, so drenched in sexuality, that they can bring a woman to her knees with a few simple syllables. In a crowd of hundreds, it was the sound of one such voice that caught Megan's attention first. Her stomach seized the instant her ears picked out the distinct timbre amongst the din of merry voices echoing through the packed rotunda of the newly renovated Barcelona Grand Spire Hotel. Around her, men and women went on sipping cava from crystal flutes as they discussed upcoming business deals or renovations to their vacation homes. Tuxedoed waiters continued their discreet circumnavigation of the room, gathering used hors d'oeuvres plates and refreshing drinks. On the surface, all appeared unchanged. It was a perfect late spring night in a perfect city, and thus far the hotel's grand reopening celebration was a resounding success. Then she heard it again. Only 3 or 4 indistinguishable words, but they hit her gut with the same force as a sucker punch from a male twice her size. A well-built male like Prince Stefano Burali, whose third-in-line claim to the throne of Sarcaccia meant he enjoyed immeasurable wealth and connections without the pressures that usually accompanied them, while possessing the Mediterranean good looks and sultry charm that often did.
So, Nicole, I'm really struck by the detail of the protagonist's reaction to a voice.
Yeah.
Unusual. Most people say, "Oh, I was struck by the eyes. I was struck by the amazing physique, whatever, or the face." But why the voice? Have you ever had this experience?
Not me. Well, actually, in some way, all of us have. So where Scandal with a Prince opens, this is for the heroine, Megan. This is the biggest night of her career. So, if you can picture a very large hotel that has a lot of business, a conference center, it's set at sort of the grand reopening of this hotel that's on the beach in Barcelona. And she has been in charge of this entire production And so this is a big thing for her career, this big party night. And as she's in this crowd circulating, drumming up business for this hotel, for all the conferences that are coming in, you can imagine that there's all kinds of noise in the background. And so when she hears a voice from her past, it just jars her out of everything she's been focusing on. So probably more so than a visual is if you're in that intense moment where you're focused, you're working, and she hears a voice from her past and she's thinking, no, this can't be what I heard. And so, unlike when you see something, oh, that's that person over there. She isn't sure. Mm-hmm. And so, the book opens with her hearing a voice and thinking, that can't possibly be what I just heard, because if it is, it's going to tank the biggest night of my career. So I liked opening with one, her being unsure, but two, the stakes being very high for her.
Right.
That's why I opened with a voice.
I actually did read the full sample on Amazon. And one thing that I had a question, not a question so much as I felt part of the story is that she thinks his presence is going to ruin the biggest night of her life. Mm-hmm. Do you really believe that he himself will do something, or is it more that she feels she will be so agitated that she'll mess up?
I think it's both. Okay. So this is someone she hasn't seen in 10 years. Mm-hmm. And it's probably not a spoiler because it's right in the first chapter. This is the father of her child. Mm-hmm. And so, but he does not know about this child. And it's not because, she's horrible and kept this secret. She tried this, he's a prince. He's very famous. If you imagine, say when William was on his study abroad, just, if we all know the British royal family. And so Prince William had a gap year in school where he went and did, work abroad. And this is a similar situation where this prince went and did, a project abroad. And after they were both home, because she was also working on this project, she found out she was pregnant. Well, you can't just go and ring up a palace and say, no, I really need to talk to him privately. And I know you guys don't know who I am. No one will put you through on that phone call. And so this is someone who had tried for quite some time. And then she realized, you know what, maybe in the long run, it is better for this child to not be in the public eye. And so she's lived a nice, quiet life. So she doesn't know, whether it'll be her agitation or the fact that this person, somebody could slip to him and say, oh yeah, her kid upstairs. Mm-hmm. So the stakes are very high, both for her personally and for her job. So I think
to hear that explanation,
her stress level went like that on the sound of a voice.
Yeah, and I can imagine that. And I wondered too, I assumed that she thought he deliberately didn't answer, but it sounds like it's really more that he never got the messages.
Well, that you find out over the course of the story. But yes, it was one where, she's trying to contact and she has no idea. Does he know? And is he ignoring me? Because try to get through a palace. You really don't know when you're speaking to whoever the person is answering the phone. Are they actually passing along these messages or not? You just don't know.
What drew you to royalty? You have 20 books written, actually 21, written over 20 years, and I think every single one is about royalty, right?
Most of them are, not all of them, but quite a few. I think, with romance, there's always stakes. There's always, we're human beings. It's difficult to have relationships, even in a good situation. And when you're in the public eye, it becomes even more difficult. Mm-hmm. And for me, there's a fascination, not so much with royalty or having a crown, but that intense level of scrutiny and different people who are in that unique situation deal with it in different ways. How many people on the planet do they have that they can talk to truly, who would understand their situation? Mm-hmm. And it's something they're born to. If you're, in Hollywood and you're very famous, you usually have had time to come to this. Very few people in Hollywood were born into that echelon of fame. And if they are, they still have time away. They can be private. But if you are an infant who, is in a royal family, you don't get that escape. So having that level of scrutiny and then sort of exploring how those relationships develop has been really a lot of fun. You can turn it a million different ways. I mean, even if you just look, again, the British royal family, you look at how Harry has handled his fame and his relationships, or how William has, or even how Elizabeth did and her sister, they all handle it very differently. And you always have to wonder for the people who are involved with them. They're going to have very different reactions to how do I love a person with this level of scrutiny and fame.
Right.
So
and your stories tend to focus on what would be called commoners kind of coming into this situation versus other royalty who are used to them.
Yes.
You're not so much interested in this celebrity as this human idea of how do you deal with something that you didn't really choose.
Exactly. And these also are, I have 2 different royalty series, and they're all very much family dramas, because on top, each of these people in the family have romantic relationships, but at the same time, they also have to negotiate a very different family dynamic. They have the same family dynamics that every other human has. But again, they also get scrutinized by the press, and the where does your money come from, or your power, or so that changes family dynamics too. And that really adds an extra layer, because, if your parents have a opinion on your romances when you're a commoner, imagine if you're in a royal family. Everybody has a voice. And so it's one really fun to explore that.
Right. I can imagine. And one thing I was really curious about, you had great attention to detail in the scene in general, but this is a world that probably most of us don't really know. So what kind of research did you put into this scene, if any?
Well, for me, a lot of it, the setting and making settings feel as real as possible helps. So, if you have any experience going to some of these very high pressure events, I've gone to a few, or, I think if you read or look at interviews with members of different royal families, not necessarily, in England, you start to see commonalities in their very human reactions to their situations. And I think it's very easy to put yourself sort of in the shoes of, looking at some of these tabloids and saying, wow, if they were writing this about me, how would I feel? Now imagine how somebody else would feel. And I think once you tap into that emotion, everything else falls into place. So when you write a story, if the emotion is something that everyone recognizes and is universal,
right,
it becomes very easy to suspend disbelief and really, truly believe in this royal family as if they were somebody and and the reader becomes invested in that.
Especially when there are 20 books about them. 21.
One would hope.
Right, one would hope, yeah. I think we're ready for beer number 2.
Beer number 2. So in full disclosure, as Laura said, I don't have the next 2 beers in front of me. One, you can't get anywhere anymore, and the other, you can't get in Minnesota anymore. But they're the right beers, so I'm going with them anyway. So for this one, the reading is called Slow Tango with a Prince, and I have chosen Tango from Wyerbacher Brewing in Pennsylvania. Obviously, the name is there for the pairing, but other sort of conceptual ideas. So this is a Belgian dark ale, strong dark ale. These are also very elegant beers. This was another situation where the surrounding they're in isn't necessarily elegant, but you've got this, prince in hiding. You've got this, what's described as a very sophisticated, and in my mind, picturing a very fashionable woman. So there's an elegance to it. And the Belgian dark beers are full of like subtle dark fruit flavors and caramel, and they're just really complex and elegant beers. But with that prince in hiding ideas, they're also kind of deceptive in that they tend to range in the 10% plus alcohol. But as is true with most Belgian beers, they don't drink that way. You would think you're drinking something that's more like 6 or 7. So the Belgian beers are dangerously deceptive in that way. I like to say you drink one and then you stand up.
Good plan.
So that is the beer that I've chosen to go with this reading.
All right.
You love this beer, Laura.
I can't wait. I have it written down. And in fact, I'm putting in big letters on top because I do keep all of these.
You won't find this one. This one was a special release a few years ago, and it's not available anywhere anymore. So
I have to add that to my notes.
Yeah.
I never experienced this beer. That is a shame. You'll have to tell me something that's kind of like it, though.
Yes. I can give you ideas for something that's like
All
it.
right. So reading number 2.
Vittorio Burali knew, without raising his eyes from the newspaper, that a woman approached. He'd always had a sixth sense for the presence of a beautiful female, but months of moving from hotel to hotel, constantly at risk of being recognized, or more accurately, recognized as his missing identical twin Alessandro, gave him defensive instincts he hadn't possessed in his life as Sarkachia's crown prince, when most of those he saw on a daily basis were carefully vetted by security staff. The quick click of this woman's heels against the cobblestones meant she approached with a purpose. Pretending not to notice, he kept his pen steady and his gaze directed at his newspaper. While he'd let his hair grow from its former close-cropped style, left a scruff of beard on his face, and changed his manner of dress, he knew it was only a matter of time before someone, a royal watcher, a reporter, a Sarkachian national, recognized him and alerted the authorities, or worse, tipped off a media outlet like Hello or People. He hoped the woman picked up on his do not disturb vibe and opted to do exactly that. "Excuse me? Do you speak English?" So much for do not disturb. He raised his head slightly, intending to utter a curt no, but the woman's wide hazel eyes and hopeful smile stopped him. She was a rare beauty, the type who took men's breath away simply by being in their presence. Better yet, her earnest expression gave no indication she'd interrupted his breakfast because she recognized him. Against his will, he smiled in return. Though she'd asked her question in flawless Spanish, she struck him as a well-dressed business traveler in need of directions. A rather beguiling traveler at that. He'd spent time with some of the world's most attractive women, models, socialites, and one actress in particular, who poured immense amounts of time and money into improving their already striking looks. Yet even without precise makeup, obvious designer clothing, or an artfully arranged hairstyle, this woman exuded a natural charm most of those women lacked, and carried herself with a healthy self-confidence that didn't stray into arrogance. Cautiously, he responded, "A bit. May I help you?" She extended her hand. "I'm Emily Sinclair. I host an American television show called At Home Abroad. Perhaps you've heard of it?" Television? Not the type of person he wanted to meet, in spite of her genuine manner and the fact she had a fantastic pair of legs. Tempting legs. He allowed himself a brief perusal before meeting her bright-eyed gaze and giving her a brief, dispassionate handshake. "I'm sorry. No." Undeterred, her smile broadened. "You're not from Argentina, are you?" "No. If you're looking for directions, I'm afraid I can't be of help." He needed to get rid of Emily Sinclair, American television host, and quickly, or risk exposure. Though, next time he traveled to the United States, he might try to find her show. He could think of far worse ways to pass the time than admiring a beautiful woman from the solitude of his own sofa.
Well, the first thing I'm really struck by is that this scene is written from a man's point of view. And I was curious, how different. I mean, there are all these jokes. Like I'm thinking of this old joke where it says her, and it's this long, like rambling paragraph, like he didn't talk to me, and then he turned away from me, and then he gave me a kiss, and then he did this, and I don't know what's going on, and is he upset with me? But then he kissed me, and it goes on and on and on. And then it says him, Cubs won, but I got a raise at work. So I was kind of thinking of that as I was reading this, that you're writing from a man's point of view. Do you feel that a man's point of view is vastly different as that joke?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. I think, it all is situational. And so, and for him, this is somebody who's a crown prince in one of those rare countries where he actually will have some political responsibility. And so whether he'd been male or female, I think he would have been a very practical person. So he would be the kind of person who would have that clipped short response. But part of the reason he is in Argentina is his former girlfriend has recently died by suicide, and she was a well-known actress. And so obviously this is something that is going to be all over the media. And what people don't know is, sort of the story behind their relationship and why when she dies, this is, even though they recently broke up, that it's very devastating to him. But he has to put on a very public face. He has to look very controlled, and he takes that seriously. And, there's a scene in the book where he sort of loses it, but he's in private. But he, you talk about a guy's point of view, it's very hide it. And then when he's in private, it's like a boom, and he has a brother who sees this and says, this is not you, you are controlled. And I think if you can take some time away, and he's like, I can't take time away, I'm the crown prince. But they're identical twins. So in your suspension of disbelief, his brother says, oh, you can go because I go all the time. And he's like, well, you're not the crown prince, to his twin brother. Says, but people can't tell us apart anyway. If you go, you be me. Nobody's going to know. And if I show up at just enough public events, a little distant, no one's going to realize that you're gone. Well, and so this brother has never experienced this before. So male or female, I think there's still, a human element to, somebody being away and experiencing a life they've never lived. Because nobody knows who he is when he is in Argentina. Nobody can say, oh, that's the crown prince of this teeny tiny European country. He's unrecognizable.
Weird. He did some things to disguise himself a little bit. I enjoy that whole thing, and I happen to have identical twins. So I found it amusing. Again, I read, the entire sample at Amazon. And so I got to see this whole thing where they're discussing, yes, we look alike. Most people can't tell us apart. And yet the voice is different. And I kind of wonder if you have some experience with identical twins, because I always said, even if I mixed them up by sight, I could always tell them apart by voice. I don't think most people know that.
Yeah, I actually, my best friend when I was like in 5th, 6th grade was an identical twin. And I could tell them apart visually in a second, but most people couldn't. But it wasn't even so much the sound of their voice. A lot of times it's the cadence, and that comes from personality. Right. And that's in this book too. And throughout the series, you see that their personalities are very different. And that carries into, with a lot of people, it carries into how they walk or how their voice, the cadence of their voice, some people speak faster than others. So they can imitate each other, but it's a hard thing to do.
It doesn't come naturally.
It doesn't always come naturally.
And a lot of people have asked me, because my books are a time travel story where it's two identical men who switch places in time.
Mm-hmm.
People have asked, how do people keep these two straight? And that's always the answer, because they may look identical, but they are so totally different that almost from the first word of a scene, you can tell one is very brash, very arrogant. I mean, they're both a little bit like, one is very overconfident, whereas the other is arrogant. It might be splitting hairs, but there's a difference. So that is one of the things that I really brought out too, is that personality, voice, the manner of carrying yourself, that they can pull it off if they really need to and want to. I really wanted to ask you, you have an interesting background. You have a BA in political science and a JD/MA. So for 5.1 million listeners, explain what JD/MA is.
I got a law degree and a master's. MA is my master's degree. I did those at the same time. So
what fields were these in? What field of law and what field was the MA in?
The law degree was just straight law degree. I went to the University of Michigan Law School. And while I was there, I got my master's in political science. So,
okay.
Yeah, okay. I was busy for a few years there.
So both the BA and the MA are political science.
Yes.
Okay, very interesting, because a lot of people get an MA maybe in something different.
Mm-hmm.
I did. I have my BA in music and then the MA in education. So how long did you work? And did you actually work in the field of law?
I did. I practiced for a little while in St. Louis. And I also clerked for a federal magistrate in Denver. But I knew most of the way through law school that it probably wasn't my passion, but, as with anything in school, being in school and learning is very different than being out and doing the job. So I wanted to give it some time, but I knew that wasn't where my deepest interest was. So it was a gradual transition to writing.
Why did you go into law if it wasn't your passion, or did you think it would be?
Well, I thought it would be. I mean, like most other authors, I'm a huge reader. I'm very analytical about everything I read, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. And I think I felt like I was pretty good at it, where I can see the different arguments, and, I'm one of those people who can have a spreadsheet in my head. So it's very easy for me to see a situation and say, okay, well, here are your 6 arguments, and here are the 10 possible responses to those 6 arguments. And, it's always like a flow chart in my head. So I think it's something that came naturally, but I just
gradually switched to.
Yeah, I did gradually switch. Because I'm a big reader, I thought it would be interesting to practice at a publishing house where I could work on foreign rights. And so I actually did while I was working, I did a summer program at NYU in publishing. And that was, after I'd graduated from law school. It was just, like an 8-week publishing graduate program. And at that time, though, a lot of the publishing houses were laying people off. So even though I thought this is something I would really like, they were laying people off. And I thought, well, what else can I do regarding publishing in the law? And, when will these positions open again? Maybe I'll apply then. But in the meantime, I started writing for magazines. I wrote for a lot of bridal magazines, believe it or not, how to negotiate your wedding contracts. So it was the most random thing in the world to write legal, articles for bridal magazines. But I ended up writing quite a few of them. And eventually I started getting asked to write a lot of other articles, whether it's travel, because with bridal magazines, they're like, we need somebody to do this honeymoon piece on Ireland. Can you do it? And I said, yeah, I could do that. So eventually I ended up freelancing full time. And from there, I decided I'm going to write a book on the side. And now I write full time.
And so explain to our listeners what a RITA award is. I think when you see it written, it's always capitalized. and yet it's not, it's actually named after a person, isn't it?
It is named after a person. So the Romance Writers of America named it after Rita Clay Estrada, who was their first president. And this is the highest award that's given to romance fiction. So I was really thrilled. I won that for a book called The Knight's Kiss. Now the RITA has changed its name just in the last year. It's now called the Vivian, after one of the founders of RWA.
Okay.
So if you see the Vivian or the RITA, it's the same award, but yeah, they've changed the name.
All right. Well, I had one other question. Oh yeah, there's my question. I'm full. How do you balance your day? Because this is your full-time job. Do you kind of go on a schedule, or do you just kind of go with the flow and, I feel like writing now, so I will?
Oh no, I need a schedule because I do want to have a consistent production. But I can only spend so many hours a day sitting at my desk. So I'm a little restless. I will get up. It's pretty routine most days. I'll get up and deal with email, walk my dog because I do have a dog, and sort of get any little nagging around the house things dealt with. And then usually I'll go to the gym or I'll go for a run because that helps sort of, it's a mental palate cleanser more than, I need to exercise. It clears my head, and then I'll come back, take a shower, and then it's writing time. And it's good to compartmentalize it, because then I can have the creative separate from things like answering email or doing any administrative work, marketing. I keep them separate.
Yeah, sounds very like my day. I think we're ready for beer number 3.
Okay, beer number 3. Before I go there, it occurred to me, should we not credit the person who's reading these readings?
Yes, I think we should. Do you want to tell our listeners?
I have a wonderful narrator for all of my Royal Scandal series. So both Royal Scandals and Royal Scandal Ceremony are performed by Hollis McCarthy. She's a fabulous stage actress. She's just incredible. And her husband is actually a dialect coach for actors, which helps in this situation because so many of my books are set with, they're international. And you can have an Egyptian businessman come in one book and somebody from Argentina in the next book. And she's masterful at performing all these voices. She's done a lot of television as well. So I know right now she has a recurring role on Bull on CBS as one of the judges. And she's been on The Good Wife. She's been on Blue Bloods. She played the Irish Prime Minister on Blue Bloods. So I feel very fortunate to have Hollis McCarthy perform the books.
Very good. So for this last beer, this is another one I don't have, but I do have a bottle for it because I have had this beer and it's special enough that I saved the bottle and put it on a shelf. So this reading is like two men's men talking as men to each other, like man friends. And there was one phrase in it that sort of caught me, something about a king bewitched with smoky whiskey. And so I was looking for kind of a masculine beer that had to do, smoky whiskey to me just says Scotch, has to be. So this is Ola Dub Special Reserve 40. So this is a strong Scotch ale, otherwise known as a wee heavy, that is aged in Highland Park 40-year whiskey barrels, Scotch whiskey barrels. So this one you would love.
I was going to say, I'm betting I would love it. Okay. And
you won't find it in Duluth because they no longer bring it to Minnesota.
Where do they bring it? I will travel.
I'm not sure, actually. I don't know.
Well, I'll have to find out. You said it's Ola Special Reserve 40.
Yeah, Ola Dub means old engine oil. Because it's dark and it's thick and it is malty and caramel and dark fruit. And then you have this lovely Scotch whiskey, smoky caramel thing, vanilla going on intertwined with that. And they make several versions of this using different age barrels. So they've got like the Highland Park Olin Dub 10, 12, 18, whatever. And the 40 is the oldest.
Okay.
And each one of them has a very distinct flavor because of the age of the whiskey that was in the barrel.
Well, I utterly trust your judgment on what I will and won't like. You know it well. So I'm going to look online and see if I can find this.
Yeah, if you can find any of the Oladoves. I mean, the 40 is the best, I think, just because of the age of the whiskey, but any of them are really spectacular.
Yeah, well, I think that your description is a much better selling point than car oil or whatever.
Old engine oil?
Old engine oil. That sounds even worse. If you can get worse than car oil, old engine oil is good. All right, so reading number 3, this is To Kiss a King.
Giovanni raised his glass, and they toasted again. Several hands later, when Giovanni collected the cards and started to shuffle, Eduardo took the opportunity to stand and stretch his legs. He reached for the whiskey and offered to refill his friend's drink. "Only if you refill yours." Eduardo sighed. "It'll have to be with water. Then I can answer honestly when Greta grills me about it tomorrow morning. She knows I have whiskey on cribbage nights." Giovanni waved a hand. "Get your water. I'll pour my own whiskey." When Eduardo returned from the bar, water in hand, Giovanni said, "If you're in the mood to answer honestly." Eduardo raised a brow. "You're distracted tonight. I'm the better player, obviously, but I'm not that much better." "You're not the better player. Then explain your performance. This isn't about becoming a grandfather again." Giovanni knew him too well. Sometimes it was maddening, but tonight, Eduardo needed a friend. "I am considering asking a woman for a date." Giovanni's boisterous laugh filled the room. "Is that all?" Eduardo flashed a look of disgust. "It's not that simple." "It is that simple, even for a king. And it's about time." Giovanni held up a hand before Eduardo could react. "You know I loved Eletta, but you deserve to have a woman in your life. The public will understand, eventually." "This isn't about that." "Well, it's sort of about that. I have other concerns. Aside from the public reaction? I doubt your children would object. Not that their objection should stop you." Giovanni frowned. "Are you considering the idea of dating in general, or is there a particular woman who interests you?" "There is a particular woman." Giovanni said nothing. Instead, he collected the cards and passed the deck to Eduardo so he could deal. Eduardo felt a prickle of irritation as he shuffled. "That's all. I want to ask a particular woman for a date, but doing so is complicated." "How so? Do you need me to ask one of this woman's friends if she likes you first? Or slip her a note that says, 'Please check the box, yes or no. Do you like Eduardo di Talora?' I realize that's how it was the last time you were interested in any female besides Aletta, but that's not how it's done these days. It's not complicated. You simply ask a woman if she'd like a date, then she says yes or she says no." "I shouldn't have suggested a second glass of whiskey." "Of course you should have. I give my best advice after the second glass." Eduardo shook his head, then tried to focus on the count. It didn't matter. Giovanni hit the target score almost immediately, ending play. "I was thinking of asking her to the symphony," he said. "The season begins next week, and I usually attend one of the early performances." "You can't take a date there." "Think, Eduardo." He met Giovanni's gaze, then a realization dawned. It's the Queen Aletta Concert Hall. Given the range of salacious headlines the media could run, they'd be ecstatic. You and your date, not so much. This woman must be something else, because that is not a misstep the Eduardo I know is prone to make. Giovanni moved a peg to score his last play, then looked up sharply. Wait. You're talking about the new ambassador? Yes, Claire Peyton. I was teasing you about the flowers earlier. I had no idea. Giovanni made a low noise of dissatisfaction. I'm apparently the one who's distracted tonight, as I completely misread your reaction. She's quite attractive. Yes. She bewitched you with smoky whiskey.
I was struck by your bio section on your site that says your books are populated by characters working to make the world a better place. And, as I've confessed to some of our previous romance authors, I am not a big of romance, period. I'm just not. But the ones I have read, it seems to me that they're usually very, I don't like the word I'm about to use because it has negative connotation, and I don't mean that, but they're very self-centered. They're very, very focused on the character's feelings. Mm-hmm. And so do you think, because you probably know romance way better than I do you think that your focus on people trying to make the world a better place is a little bit unusual, or is it more common than I know?
There's a range. The beautiful thing about romance novels is that the genre spans all kinds. So you have some books that are very first person, immediate, and set in a very sort of emotionally narrow field where the main characters, like you said, they're focused on their relationship. And so that can obviously make it feel very it can feel one-dimensional or narrower in focus. Others, encompass whole worlds, and that's emotionally, as opposed to, the range of, we have vampire romances, we have sci-fi romances, we have romances with mystery, we have, suspense. So I like, my books are a little longer than some, but they really encompass family dynamics along with sort of the individuals navigating their romantic relationships. So that gives me a much bigger playground, and I can really explore who these characters are, in a wider way. Like in To Kiss a King, the scene that we just heard was, the king and his best friend from childhood. And you don't always see that side of a character, especially as public as a king, reflected by somebody who has no problem telling him what he thinks.
Right.
So I like being able to do that and to show, that they are who they are outside of a romantic relationship.
Right.
I think it makes for a bigger, richer story. And it keeps me from getting bored as a writer.
Mm-hmm. You went with fictional kingdoms. In my writing, I went very, very historical, tried absolutely every detail down to what the weather was that day, if possible. What are some of the advantages of going with a fictional kingdom as opposed to a real one, especially in the modern day?
Yeah, I mean, it gives me flexibility where I'm not hemmed in by rules that may exist in certain countries. So, for example, like in Sarcaccia, I created it as an island off the coast of Italy. It's described very early on as a quick ferry ride from Naples. So, it sort of has that feel of a Corsica or a Sardinia, but it has its own traditions. And I like that because I can give my characters, I can have them very grounded in the region. So this is what it's like to live in the Mediterranean and with its larger history. So like I even mentioned, these things happened in World War II, because if you lived on an island in that area, there were things happening. But at the same time, these characters can say, have their own tradition. So, in the main city in Sarcaccia, all the old buildings have unique cornerstones. So, I can say, in the 1500s, all these guilds had, they would advertise basically on the cornerstones of buildings. and they would bid to be able to get a cornerstone on an important building. So, I could add in those fun layers like that. And then, 6 books later, somebody can be going on a tour of the cornerstones, and it brings in that history and makes it feel very real, but it still gives me flexibility. So I'm not hemmed in.
We're getting down to our last minutes here. One thing that I've noticed is an awful lot of authors and poets I know seem to have grown up in the military or at least traveling a lot. Mm-hmm. And you did too. What branch was your dad in?
My father was in the Army.
Okay. Were you in Germany at all?
I was. I lived there for 6 years, and I graduated from high school.
That's right. American Coast there. That. Yeah. I was on the other end of this school. I did kindergarten there. So we also lived there about 5.5, 6 years. So how much do you think that kind of background has influenced your writing?
Oh, enormously. Because just from the time I was little, my parents made a big effort for, the first time we lived in Germany, we were not on post. And I was there in second grade, second and third and fourth grade. The first time I lived there, we were the only American family in the town where we lived. And I spoke no German. And my parents said, okay, go outside. There's a kid out there playing. Go. Just go. You'll figure it out. And I think growing up like that gives you, and we traveled almost every weekend. My parents kind of crammed us into the back of this little VW, and we went wherever we could drive in a weekend. And, it gives you, especially when you're younger like that, I think when you're younger, it gives you that just a different world view than what you get if you live in one place all the time.
I think so too.
I really appreciated it.
I loved it. And I've had so many people over the course of my life say, oh, that's terrible. That's an awful way to grow up. I'm like, how can you say that? I think it's the best way ever to grow up. That's one of the things I absolutely love is that I grew up in the military and I got to see so many different cultures. I got to see this history of medieval Germany, to hear these stories. These were my earliest memories. And I do think that impacts us as writers. So it's been interesting to me to see how many writers I know did grow up with a kind of nomadic lifestyle, usually military, but too. So
somebody will get that phone.
Okay. I think it's time to wrap up. Do you have any upcoming events, Michael?
No, of course not. Well, I've got a whole slew of upcoming events, but none of them public.
What about you, Nicole?
Oh, sorry, about me? My phone is distracting me, of course. Right now I'm working on my next book. So that is my laser focus. I do have, hopefully, knock wood, the Royal Scandals, the first series set in Sarkatia was optioned for TV and film by Kim Fields. So if you know who Kim Fields is, she, depending on your age bracket, she was in Facts of Life. She was in Living Single. And right now she's in a show on Netflix called The Upshaws. And she's also directed a lot of shows, which I wasn't aware. I mean, I knew she had. I wasn't aware of either. I was unaware she had directed so much. So she has optioned the books, and we will see what comes of it. So I think it would be fabulous if I could see that series on film or TV. That would be wonderful. So that's a knock wood project. We'll see what comes of it.
Well, my only upcoming ongoing event, obviously the release of the book that I just talked about at the beginning, and Gabriel's Horn, my publishing company, is accepting poetry submissions, formal poetries, new poems in formal styles like sonnets, villanelles, or whatever, on the topic this year of love. So that is at gabrielshornpress.com/poetry-anthology. And links. I almost forgot links.
Links. I am at aperfectpint.net and aperfectpint. We are at booksandbrews.net or Book and Brews on Instagram, Books and Brews with Laura Vosica and Michael Agnew on Facebook. Laura, where are you?
I am now at lauravosica.com, and I think bluebellschronicles.com will also get you to my, I would say brand new page, but it's actually been quite a few months since I completely renovated it. But I really like the looks of it. And then, of course, oh, yeah, Chris and I have a site. We're at, I think it's chrisandlaurapowell.com. So, I just couldn't remember. I think we put his name first because it flowed better. So, anyway, last question of the episode.
Wait, Nicole, where do we find you?
I'm at NicoleBurnham.com. No H in Nicole, the H is in Burnham. So NicoleBurnham.com, and that has links to everything social media. And I do have a newsletter, and I've written a few things that are exclusively for newsletter subscribers, sort of as a thank you for, getting the occasional newsletter and being a reader. So people who sign up get a couple of free novellas that are set in the Royal Scandals world. So.
And who do we have next week?
I'm hoping I pronounced it right. Next, we have Christine Husom. She is a national best-selling author from Minnesota. She pens the suspenseful Winnebago County mysteries and the cozy, but not too cozy, Snow Globe Shop mysteries, where bad guys demonstrate not everyone is Minnesota nice. She also has stories in many anthologies and co-edited presumably one anthology, not one story. She served with the Wright County Sheriff, and I happen to know exactly where that is. That would probably be up in Buffalo, Minnesota, where three of my kids went to high school. She's a member of Mystery Writers of America and Sisters in Crime, and is active with the Twin Cities chapter. She loves meeting readers at a variety of venues and events, and you can find her at www.christinehusom.com.
Awesome. Looking forward to that. So, Nicole, thank you for hanging out with us today.
Thank you.
And good luck with your new book and the optioning of your old books. This has been Books and Brews, episode number 28. Thank you all out there for joining us. Cheers.